Hello, thank you for coming along to this flipped collaborate. We're going to explore the requirements for assignment 2, your folio. Hello, thank you. Hello, thank you for coming along to this flipped collaborate. We're going to explore the requirements for assignment 2, your folio. You can see that assignment 2 is due in week 9. You have plenty of time to get this folio put together. It's worth 40% of your overall grade, so it's the highest weighting of all your assignments. And you'll need to write 2,000 words plus or minus 10% for this assignment. Of course, there's a reminder here that you can ask all sorts of questions in your assignment 2 Q&A discussion board. You'll have plenty of opportunity to read over this information about professional portfolios, but I just wanted to highlight the areas at the bottom here, the learning outcomes. You'll see that this is focused on principles, policies and practices, and you'll find those terms throughout the rubric as well as the task requirements. And we're looking at productive learning environments and positive spaces where children can learn. It's about planning for these productive learning environments. They don't happen by accident, and there's a real focus on preventative models, so getting a front foot and thinking of ways that you can prevent problem behaviours from occurring. Now, don't let the amount of details inside this assignment details tab daunt you. We're going to explore the 4 scenarios in a moment, and you can see that there's some details about what you need to write about each resource and the folio format. We'll go into plenty more detail about those. But what I really wanted to highlight on this section is right down the bottom here, there's 2 documents that are important for you. The first is the folio template, and you'll need to make sure that you download that because you must submit that for your assignment. And the other is the tips sheet. Just like with assignment 1, these tips have been pulled together based on areas where students have struggled a little in the past. So make sure that you do read over those. There's some really, really useful advice in there, and I won't repeat it because I'll let you read it yourself. But make sure that you access that tips sheet at the bottom of the assessment details tab. So I think this task can be broken down into 4 general steps. You're going to start with the weekly module. You consider each scenario, you choose your 4 resources, and then you're going to write a 500-word rationale for each resource. Starting with step 1, that's part of the tips sheet as well. Make sure that you do start with the weekly module because obviously as an assignment task, we're looking to see if you've understood what you've read and what you've been exploring during the weekly tasks. So your rationales and your discussions should be reflecting what you're reading in the weekly modules, and then you build on those with your research. And step 2 is to explore the scenarios. So let's have a quick look at these together. The first scenario is about Margot. Margot is a 2-year-old girl who's having trouble transitioning into childcare 2 days per week. She's an only child and has started transitioning to care when her mother has returned to work. She's refusing to eat and sleep while in the setting, and she is persistently calling out for mama or dada. However, she plays well alongside other children and appears to be happy engaging with experiences which are planned for her, especially looking at books, playing with blocks and collecting balls. Now you're going to be looking at Margot's scenario with the focus of week 3, which is relationships with self. So you're thinking about how you can build this in Margot. The resource you choose needs to be focused on the individual child. So it needs to be something that is for Margot specifically. Now, scenario 2, we're talking about Janine. And Janine is an 8-year-old girl in a public school in regional Australia. Her auntie and uncle have recently separated and she is very close to them and her cousins. Janine's father has stepped in to assist with supporting the cousins, and this has left Janine feeling left out, alone, and replaced by her father's actions. As a result, Janine has started to create controlling rules for herself and others at school by bossing her friends around and taking charge of all class tasks. Her friends are starting to call her bossy boots, and she's yelling back, causing friction and upsetting the classroom harmony. Her teacher has noticed her controlling behaviour and has spoken to her at length about the importance of letting others be themselves. Janine is upset about this and has started to tell her mum she doesn't like her teacher or want to go to school. So when you're thinking about Janine, you're thinking about it in the context of relationships with others. You can see that there's a number of relationships that are causing problems in this scenario, and particularly you're thinking about what are Janine's relationships with people. But you're looking at it from a focus of parent support. So Janine's father has been working with her cousins and her aunt and uncle, or supporting her cousins. And you know that Janine's mum is also in the picture, and she's been thinking about Janine's relationship with her teacher. So you're going to develop a parent support resource, or find a parent support resource, which will help to address this scenario and help to prevent any more problem behaviours. The third scenario is all about Bertie. Now, Bertie is a 4-year-old. He has excellent communication skills, numeracy skills, and an interest in anything scientific. His parents believe he is gifted. Bertie is not engaging with any of the children at kindergarten. He prefers to undertake experiences in isolation. Bertie prefers to sit quietly and undertake pencil and paper activities similar to what he does at home. His teacher has tried to engage him in several experiences, but is being pressured by his parents to complete a report so that they can enrol him in an exclusive school early. His teacher is concerned that although Bertie has areas of strength, his social skills need to develop, and he refuses to engage with creative and physical activities at all. So you're thinking about Bertie in the context of the week 5 topic, relationship with the curriculum. And you'll know that there's a broad focus for the curriculum. And perhaps in this case, Bertie is not addressing that broad focus. When you choose a resource for week 5 for this scenario, make sure it is an activity-based resource. We know that Bertie is pretty good at sitting down at tables and doing activities with pens and paper, but we're needing to choose something that's going to support him to extend those behaviours. And finally, you're going to look at Michael's story. Michael is in grade 6 and he is taking days off school for illness. Owing to the amount of days he misses from school, he's not been able to make real connections with his peers. And as a result, he has no friends at school. Michael's illness prevents him from attending school as he has a degenerative health condition, which means he needs to attend the children's hospital across the city. At times, he is in hospital care for up to 2 to 3 weeks. He has a school nurse, which was fine when he was younger, but now he is becoming resentful towards his medical carers, teachers and parents. He has missed a significant part of the school curriculum. So how are you going to support Michael in his learning and his behaviour? He's struggling with friendships, he's resenting the adults in his life, and he needs some sort of resource which is class, group or community based. So you're going to be searching out or developing something which will engage Michael with a group or with a class or a community that's going to build up his sense of self-worth and possibly build those social connections that he's missed out on. So coming back to the steps, you'll see that you do need to consider each scenario and you do need to write about every scenario. And we know that some of you will have not as much experience with younger children or not as much experience with older children, but we really encourage you to draw on the experience you do have, even if it's only from your own childhood. Think about what you've experienced. And of course also you can ask for lots of support from your peers, because in your learning groups there'll be a huge range of experience that you can ask for help about. So that's step 2. And step 3 is going to be choosing the resources to support these scenarios. Now, a resource is anything that you use to support learning or teaching. And that means it could be anything. In this case, you're going to have a range of resources. So we're looking for you to demonstrate that you've thought widely about what could be used, and that you're not just giving us 4 different book resources or 4 different video resources, that you're demonstrating some variety in that way. And also think about demonstrating variety of something for a child, something for a parent, an activity, an object, a program to follow. There's all sorts of things that it could be. And it's really up to you to think about what would support the scenario. Always come back to the child and what's going to be best for the child and what resource is going to be the most helpful for them. So really, in selecting your resource, you're only limited by your imagination. It can be something that you create. You might develop something yourself, or you might have seen it in action, so you might be able to describe it using text. It might be something that you've sourced from your research, so you might be able to cite someone saying that this resource has come from this particular organisation or this particular text. And if you think back to your own school times, think of all the strange, crazy and wonderful things that teachers bring into classrooms and learning spaces. Possibly if it is something strange and weird and wonderful, it might be more engaging, but also it might, if it's something that you've drawn from your research, then it might be evidence-based. So there's a lot of ways that you can approach it. And really, it isn't so much about the resource selection, even though we are looking for some interesting and creative ideas. It's more about how you justify the resource and whether you can demonstrate the thinking and the theory behind it. We'll get to that in a moment. So when you've selected your resource, you need to find some way to share it with your readers, with your ELA. You can see here is the template that you need to paste these things into. And it gives you an idea here that you can use a text description, so you can just describe the resource. An image, that's often a really helpful way to do it. say if you've got a video, you might take a screenshot, or if it's a object, you might take a photograph. If it is drawn from a resource, you might be able to photograph the description in the resource, or take a screenshot. Or you can include a hyperlink here. You also need to give a brief description of the resource inside your rationale. You can see that one of the bullet points does talk about what the resource is, but make sure that's very brief. We don't want you eating up a lot of words describing the resource. It's going to be a bit of a balancing act because it needs to have enough information for your ELA to be able to understand it. Remember, we have a limited time to mark your work, and if we have to go off and find your resource and dig through the resource to find out exactly what it is, that's going to cut back on the time that we have to give you feedback, and so you might not get as much valuable feedback because we've had to spend time going and finding your resource. So yes, you do need to put something inside this folio that's going to give us enough information to understand what the resource is. And that brings us on to step 4, writing your rationale for each resource. Now, one thing I really like about this assignment overview is that it's really clear about what you need to put into these rationales. You need to identify the behaviours. So just like in assignment 1, you need to think about what are the observable overt behaviours that might be present in those scenarios. What things might you see Margot doing? We know that she's calling out and she's not eating, so those are some of the things that we've been explained. You need to add some of that into your rationale. We need to talk about the preventative models of behaviour management. This is where you're looking at those really positive ways of avoiding the behaviour where possible and addressing it early when you can. And that's going to be reflected in the resource. So what are the ways that you're preventing the behaviour through the resource? And you're also going to need to explain how the resource will assist you to establish that safe, supportive and productive learning environment. You'll see those terms, safe, supportive and productive, repeated throughout the criteria and the rubric and the assignment instructions. And usually that's a good indicator that you want to be using those words in your rationales where possible. So you might not focus on all three in every rationale, but you might talk about safe in some ways, you might talk about supportive in some ways. And using those terms are a really good way to key in your reader. Yep, I know what I'm talking about. I've read the assignment overview and this is how I'm addressing it. Academic writing's about really being explicit in that way. And there's also this final point which talks about the behaviour theory. So in the tips sheet, you'll read about ways that some people go too deep into the behaviour theory. Basically, we understand the behaviours, we understand the behaviour theory, and we've already asked you to explain it in your first essay. In these rationales, we want you to name the theory and focus more on how it supports your analysis. So let's look at how you do that. To work out how to link behaviours to the behaviour theory, head back into the learning materials again, into the modules, and you'll see that each one has examples of how you can link to theory. I've highlighted behaviourist and humanistic in this example. We'll also be exploring this in our live Collaborate. And it is a really key part of this assignment. So you need to be able to think, how would this behaviourist or humanist or cognitivist, how would those people explain these behaviours, and how would they say that this resource is being used, and why is it being used in that way? You'll see that the assignment overview asks you to use just the learning theories from our unit, which are these ones: the behaviourism, humanism, cognitivism, ecological systems theory, and of course socioculturalism. So do stick with just those ones. Don't go outside those for this unit. Sometimes I find I need an example to understand how things might work or how things might look. So this example is not about our scenarios, but it is an example of how to demonstrate a resource and then give a rationale for it. So in this case, the resource is a video, and this student has taken a screenshot of the website, which includes a little bit of the video, the start of the video. You can see that they've cited the resource, the image here. Remember that you need to put citations for your resources unless it's something that you create yourself. So we're always expecting that if there's no citations, that it's your own work. And if it's not your own work, it must have a citation. So here's this resource, Bullying No Way, and let's have a look at how it's been justified, or what the rationale is. Now you can see the disclaimer at the bottom. This is not a perfect sample, but it is an example of how you might be able to complete these rationales. You'll get a chance to read this on the slides, or you can pause the recording at the moment to read over the details, so I won't read the whole thing. But you can see that in the first paragraph, there's an explanation of the resource, and it gives enough details saying what the video is about and what it covers, that the reader can understand what the resource is about. You can see that it talks about behaviour, and it links this behaviour to both the early years learning framework as well as ways that it's desirable in the classroom. And then you can see that it talks about how the theory connects to this resource and ways that this behaviour can be addressed through the resource. So this is just one example of how to do it. If you don't want to use the same paragraph structure, that's fine, so long as you address the key areas, the 3 bullet points, throughout your 500 words, then that's the way that you need to. What you need to address for your rationales. So some notes here about the structure of your portfolio, your folio. This, of course, will support you as you work towards developing a professional portfolio, and you'll use these in your career, particularly with accreditation and other areas like that. You must use the template for this assignment. Please don't develop your own template or head off track in that way. Just download the file that you've got and make sure that you submit that. We are expecting you to write in third person for this. So the resource will, or the resource could, not I will use this for. And of course, being an assignment, you're going to make sure that you include lots of citations to theories and policies and other things. That you will cite anything which isn't your own work, and if you've got some resources, that you're going to make sure that you give credit to where you found them. You don't need an introduction or conclusion to the folio, The tile word limit's just going to be about addressing those key areas for your rationales. And you can use dot points where appropriate for this because it's not that formal essay structure. So there's not quite as much importance placed on how to lay it out this time because you do have the template there for you. You can choose a title page if you would like to, that's optional. In the folio template, you're going to insert your image, hyperlink or description. You can use more than one image, but limit it to 2, I think, 3 if you were stretching it, but we really don't need that many images. And then you're going to put your rationale, and of course because it's plus or minus 10%, then your rationale is going to be between 450 to 550 words. We're also looking at 2,000 words across all 4 rationales, so if you do go a little bit under on one and a little bit over on another, then that's fine. As a total, we're looking at 2,000 words. But try not to give one scenario, say 600 or 700 words, and another one only 300 or 400 words. Make sure that you balance them evenly. You might find that your rationale spreads across 2 or 3 pages when double spaced, so just keep that in mind that it does need to be double spaced, and we're okay with it spreading across more than one page. And of course you'll have your reference list, which is in APA style. Remember that there is more guidance for formatting inside the student portal, and please use size 12 font, and the student portal talks about font as well. Those all important word counts. Okay, so we're just looking at your rationales and the citations, or the citations inside your rationales. We're happy for you to discount any words in the template for this assignment. When I deleted all of the grey words, which you'll delete as well, there's 63 words in the template, so you can deduct that from your word count. You might need a brief text description of the resource. Some people will use a photograph and some people will use the text to describe their resource. So this isn't included in the word count. And the cover sheet, I'm happy for you to deduct the cover sheet words, and of course your reference list is not counted. So that's it. It's just those words inside the rationale box which will be counting towards your word count for this one. As with assignment 1, if you need an extension for a short time, up to 48 hours, please email your ELA. And for longer extensions, you'll need to submit via the extension request form. And also please email me any evidence that you have. There's no way to submit documents on the extension form, so just shoot them to me in an email. When you have questions, there are all sorts of places you can go to for help. Your ELA is probably going to be the first stop for a lot of your questions, so post all of your questions about tasks and the content onto your discussion boards. We'll answer via email as well, but it's great if you can put it on the discussion board. That way everyone can benefit from the question and from the answer. And we don't get the same question repeated inside our emails. You can also get help from the student advisors. They're especially good for technical problems, whether it's an issue with your submission or if you're having any trouble with Canvas or things not working properly. You can chat to them via email, live chat, or you can call them. And they're also your go-to for information about academic skills and research writing. You can ask them questions about either how to do those things or how to find out more information. And of course, they're also good for your enrolment questions that you might have. You've probably already talked to them about those things. You might not know about the student coaches, and these are, they're such a fantastic resource. You can chat to them about planning out your time. about developing your study skills, or if you're having trouble engaging in your studies and you're finding that you're struggling, make an appointment with the student coaches, and they'll do an online chat with you or a telephone chat, and they'll just help you to map out your time and talk through some strategies to help you with either your engagement or your studies. And so finally, there's Studiosity. And this is our draft review service, which is available inside Canvas. One of the modules is called Studiosity. And they'll get back to you within 24 hours when you submit a draft, and they'll give you some suggestions about ways to further develop your writing. I think that you have 8 submissions each subject for each teaching period. So that's almost 2 for each assignment. Oh, sorry, that is 2 for each assignment. It's almost 3 for each assignment. So you can submit multiple times. Think about getting some drafts done early so that you can send it off to Studiosity. A reminder here, of course, you will be submitting it through Turnitin. Remember that there is support through Studiosity for drafts, so your ELA will not be able to check an entire draft, but you are welcome to put sections of your work, say a paragraph or a very brief plan, onto the discussion board for some feedback from your ELA. But if you're after a full draft, then that's when you send it off to Studiosity. Now, this assignment actually has 5 criteria, and you can see them listed here. The first couple are about the resource, which one you've selected, whether it matches the scenario, and how you describe and implement it. Then we start to look at how you discuss and understand behaviour, and how you understand the development of behaviour. That's where the learning theories come into play. And the final criteria looks at your academic writing, your referencing, and your use of sentence structure, etc. I'm just going to have a quick look at the past descriptors. So the first one is about the appropriateness, whether the resource you've chosen matches the student and the case study. So be sure to be looking at those focus, the weak focus and the resource focus, to make sure that you do meet these past descriptors, that it's appropriate. Now you'll see that the first bullet point in this section looks at theories and talking about ways that you can link the policies, principles and practices for maintaining these environments to the theories. So in order to get a pass, you're going to need to name a theory and talk about ways that the theory is supported or supports your choice. You can see that the second bullet point talks about preventative models. So you're thinking about each scenario sets up some behaviours that are occurring, and you're wanting to prevent escalation of these behaviours, and thinking about the ways that the student and the child is, what are the reasons for the behaviour, and how can you address these with the child so that they can learn ways to behave more appropriately. And by behaving more appropriately, you're going to be establishing and maintaining, here's those keywords again, safe, supportive and productive. So think about whether their behaviours are going to change so that it's more safe, whether it's more supportive or productive, or perhaps all of those things. You can see that each item has the rationale and that some understanding of the behaviours in children, and it shows your understanding. So at a pass level, we just want to be able to see some understanding. We just want to know that you've thought about what behaviours are appropriate for children, that you understand why these behaviours might be occurring, and you've been thinking about ways that you can support change. That's for the past standard. And that you might be, at a past level, you might be relying upon your own opinion or anecdotes more than the evidence of scholars. So we understand that as you develop further up the rating scale and that you're heading for that HD range, then it'll be less upon your own anecdotal evidence and more upon your researched evidence. And the final 2 bullet points look at your written expression and your APA. So don't forget about these things, because if you aren't citing your resources, or if your writing is not clear and understandable, then we can't hit that pass standard. Now in the live collaborate, you will get a chance to ask some questions, but the main focus is going to be again on brainstorming and workshopping and sharing your ideas. So in order for that to happen effectively, it would be really helpful if you could make a start on at least one of the scenarios, just so that you've had a chance to think through, well, how do I do this linking to theory bit? Or I'm not really sure about how I'm going to explain this resource really quickly, or I'm not sure if the behaviours in this scenario are quite right. It's not until you start thinking through how you're going to approach it that you think of your questions. So ideally, have a crack at one of them before you come along to the live collaborate. And if not, just have a think about some of the resources that you might think could be appropriate, or some that you might really like. We look forward to joining you in the live collaborates, and of course we'll be seeing you in the discussions as well.